The city did not welcome me. It opened its mouth and let me in. I arrived before sunrise, when the sky over the Western Ocean was the color of old metal. Trains moved through the high rails above the terminal, dragging pale light across the glass roof. Nobody looked up. They knew the rule of cities. Keep moving. I carried one bag, my father's sword case, and a name I had not said aloud in years. Ken Hayabusa. To the city database, he was dead. To the message hidden in my glove, he was not finished speaking. Polluted dawn pressed between the towers. The light was thin and yellow. Then the sword case pulled against my shoulder, and the old weight returned. I had crossed an ocean because of a dead man's instruction. That sounded cleaner than the truth. The truth was that my father had left a wound inside me, and even after all these years, I still carried it like a second heart. The case was old cedar wrapped in black polymer. The blade within it was older than every tower around me. My father once told me a man only borrowed the sword until his hands were no longer worthy. I was 8 when he said that. I was 9 when my mother died. I was 9 when he sent me away. No explanation, no return, only distance. Across the taxi lane, a woman in a gray coat stood beside a vending kiosk. She was not looking at me. That was why I noticed her. Everyone else looked once at the sword case and turned away. The woman stayed too still to be ordinary. Then a bus slid between us, and when it passed, she was gone. I did not follow. Not yet. The message chip warmed inside my glove. It had arrived in Tokyo through a dead courier address. Most of the file had burned away in transit. What remained was 6 seconds of my father's voice, half static, half breath. Ryu. Then a break. If I am gone, take the dragon sword west. Another cut, a hard sound like metal under pressure. Find the light before the shadow wakes, then coordinates. No apology, no explanation, only a command. I hated how quickly I obeyed it. A child near the curb pointed at my sword case and laughed. The sound sent me back to a winter schoolyard, to boys who thought pain was funny when it belonged to someone else. I remembered standing up. I remembered choosing not to cry. A horn pulled me back. The taxi driver leaned from his window. You getting in or haunting the curb? I got in. He looked at the sword case. Convention? Funeral, I said. That ended his questions. The taxi moved into the waking city. We passed elevated rails, glass towers, and an old shrine fenced behind sensor wire. Fresh flowers rested at the gate, and I thought of my mother. After she died, my father stopped touching my shoulder. Then he sent me away. The taxi screen displayed the coordinates. Red Lantern Arcade. Food, music, private rooms, open 24 hours. The city was awake now, but it did not feel alive. It felt monitored. My glove vibrated once. Not the message chip. A proximity warning from the sword case. In the taxi window, I saw a black motorcycle 2 lanes back. No license plate. Rider in a white helmet. Above the traffic, a surveillance drone dipped too low, then corrected itself. The motorcycle followed us through 3 turns. I let my breathing slow. My hand rested on the case latch. My father had trained me to notice pursuit before I understood why a child would need such lessons. Ken had taught me survival with patience. Then he had left me to survive him. The taxi turned into the lower neon district where morning could not fully enter. Rails cut the sky into strips. Signs burned in daylight. Music leaked from clubs where the night had not ended, only changed its name. The Red Lantern Arcade sat beneath an elevated train line, beside a pawn clinic and a noodle bar with a cracked dragon sign. A red lantern hung above the black door, glass and metal with soft internal fire. The taxi stopped half a block away. Before I got out, the driver spoke again. Whoever you're burying, don't let this city keep the bones. I stepped into the cold air. The motorcycle rolled past without slowing. A small white mark had been painted on the rider's jacket. A crescent shape thin as a cut moon. I watched until he vanished under the rail bridge. Then I turned toward the red lantern. The woman in the gray coat stood beneath it. This time she was looking at me. Ryu Hayabusa, she said. Hearing my name in her voice made the morning feel suddenly narrow. I did not answer. She glanced once at the sword case. Your father trusted the wrong people, she said. If you walk in alone, you'll make the same mistake. A train thundered over us. When the sound passed, the red lantern flickered, and the door behind her opened just enough to let music breathe into the street. Slow bass, low voices, a room waiting beneath the city's skin. I tightened my grip on the sword case and stepped toward her. The woman in the gray coat did not move when I stepped closer. That was the first thing I trusted about her. You know my name, I said. I know who your father was. Everyone knows the dead after the database confirms them. The database is not where this begins. My name is Irene, she said. Inside, ask for room 9. Do not use your real name. Do not open the sword case unless you have no choice. Orders. Advice. I don't know the difference when it comes from strangers. A train passed overhead. The rails screamed softly after it was gone. Neither did your father, she said. I almost reached for anger because anger was simpler than need. Then 2 men stepped out of the arcade. Their jackets were too heavy for the dry morning. Their hands were empty in the careful way trained hands become before they are not. Irene moved first. Her shoulder brushed mine, light as a warning. Inside. The men reached for their coats. Irene raised a small black pistol and fired once into the pavement between them. People scattered without screaming. I opened the arcade door and stepped through. Heat touched my face. Then light. The red lantern was not an arcade, not really. It was a nightclub wearing the skin of an old memory. Broken game cabinets lined the walls, their screens filled with blue ghosts. Red paper lamps hung above chrome tables, each one wired with a surveillance lens. Irene shut the door behind us. Room 9. At the bar, a man with silver teeth looked at my sword case. Name? He asked. Guest of Smith, Irene said. That name changed the room, only a little. A pause in one conversation, a camera tilting lower. Silver Teeth slid a key across the bar. We moved down a narrow hall where the music thinned behind the walls. Each door had a red number and a small lantern above it. At room 9, Irene stopped. You came here to find the sender, she said. I came because my father told me to. Those may not be the same thing. You knew Ken? No. Too quick, too clean. But you know people who did. Yes. Walter Smith. Her silence answered before her mouth did. A click sounded inside room 9. I pushed Irene aside before I knew I had decided. The door burst outward. A masked man came through low, a curved blade folding out from his wrist. I drew the dragon sword halfway from the case. Half was enough. Steel met alloy. Sparks jumped into the hall. Irene dropped to one knee and fired past my hip. A second attacker came through the alley window, glass scattering across the carpet like ice. I drove the sword case into the first man's guard, turned, and kicked him into the wall. Irene pulled me backward as another shot tore through the lantern above us. Red light died. In the dark, my father's training came back more clearly than the music. Do not chase the weapon. Read the shoulder. Move before the hand finishes telling the truth. I moved. The dragon sword left the case fully. Its edge caught the broken arcade light and held it like a thin white flame. The attackers hesitated, not because of me, because of the blade. They knew it. That frightened me more than their masks. One strike cut the weapon from the nearest attacker's hand. Irene moved beside me, not behind me. She fought like someone trained by institutions that taught survival without mercy and called it duty. The last masked man raised a device in his palm. Irene saw it. Down! I listened. White static burst through the room. The cameras popped one by one. My teeth hurt. The sword hummed in my hand, low and alive, as if the old metal remembered a language the city had forgotten. When my vision cleared, the attackers were gone. Room 9 was wrecked. No sender, no Walter. Just dead screens and a small black case under the broken window. Inside was a core the size of a child's heart, not flesh, not machine, something between crystal and old bone with pale light turning inside it. Irene went still. What is that? I asked. The reason your father died, she said. I looked at her. She did not correct herself. Outside the broken window, morning had hardened into dry afternoon light. The city glared through the alley, bright and merciless. I picked up the core. It was warm. The message chip in my glove pulsed an answer. On one dead screen, static gathered and formed 3 words before dissolving again. Find Walter Smith. Walter is alive? I asked. For now. Where? Across the old market district, under the museum. Irene opened the alley door. But if they know you have the light core, every roof between here and there becomes a hunting ground. You still haven't told me who you work for. No, Irene said. I haven't. And you expect me to follow you? She stepped into the hard daylight. No, I expect you to follow him. Above us, the city train roared toward the old market, and somewhere beneath stone and glass, a dead man's past waited for me. The train carried our direction above us. I followed it from the alley into the old market district, where the lower city widened into crooked streets and patched metal awnings. Vendors were closing their stalls early. Old women pulled crates of fruit behind shuttered gates. A boy swept broken glass into the gutter without looking at me, but he looked at the sword case. Everyone looked at the sword case. Irene walked 2 steps ahead, then 1 step behind, never staying in the same place long enough for me to decide whether she was leading me or watching me. You move like police, I said. No, she said. Police like to be seen. And you don't. Not by the wrong people. That is not an answer. It was not meant to be. The light core rested inside my travel bag, wrapped in the inner cloth from the sword case. Even covered, I could feel it. Not heat exactly, more like a pulse that had learned patience. The message chip in my glove answered it every few minutes with a faint vibration. Ken's voice stayed in my head. Find the light before the shadow wakes. The old market climbed toward the museum hill, but the streets did not go straight. They bent around noodle shops, pawn stalls, shrines, sign kiosks, and clinics with curtains drawn over the windows. Above everything, signs hung from rusted frames. Some were dead. Some flickered in daylight. Red dragons, blue knives. A woman smiling over a brand of synthetic sleep. Irene stopped beneath a sign shaped like a lantern. Do you hear that? She asked. I listened. At first, only the district. Steam vents, closing shutters, train wheels, then footsteps above us. 3 sets, maybe 4, moving across the metal roofline. I looked up. A shadow crossed the sunset. Irene had already drawn her pistol. They're not waiting until we reach Walter. Good, I said. She looked at me. I hate waiting. I ran. The first hunter dropped from the roof with a short blade in each hand. I stepped under him, struck his wrist with the sword case, and kept moving. Irene fired once behind me. The shot hit a sign bracket above the alley mouth, and the falling sign cut off 2 more hunters before they could land cleanly. She was not just accurate. She was thinking 3 seconds ahead. That made her useful. It did not make her safe. I reached a service ladder and climbed. Metal shook under my hands. The travel bag pulled at my shoulder, and the light core inside it seemed to grow heavier with every floor. By the time I reached the roof, the sun had dropped between the towers. Clear orange light lay across the city. Beautiful in the careless way cities can be beautiful while trying to kill you. A hunter waited on the roof edge. His mask was smooth black, with the same thin crescent mark I had seen on the motorcycle rider. He looked at my sword case. Hayabusa blood, he said. The words were quiet. The anger they found in me was not. I drew the dragon's sword. He moved fast, but he moved like a man who had studied a pattern. My father had taught me never to become one. I let him see the first step, then changed the second. His blade cut air. Mine took the weapon from his hand and sent it spinning into the street below. I could have cut deeper. I did not. He saw that too. His head tilted, as if mercy confused him more than pain. Behind me, Irene climbed onto the roof. Ryu? More hunters crossed from the next building, running along a narrow beam that held 2 old signs together. Below them, traffic crawled through the market like a river of tired lights. The museum is 3 blocks east, Irene said. We can lose them through the signs. We? She gave me a look that almost became a smile. You can argue after we survive. She jumped first. Not far enough. For half a breath, I saw her falling between the buildings, gray coat lifting in the wind. Then her hand caught a maintenance cable, and she swung hard into the next wall, boots hitting old concrete. I followed. The city became distance, edge, sound. A signboard rushed beneath me. Neon warmed my face. I hit the far wall, pushed off, caught a window ledge, and climbed without thinking. For a moment, I was a child again in the mountain training yard, jumping between wet stone posts while my father watched in silence. I used to hate that silence. Now I wondered how much fear he had hidden inside it. A hunter leapt after me. I heard his coat snap in the wind. I turned on a narrow ledge, drew the sword low, and forced him to stop short. Irene fired from below, not at him, but at the pipe above his head. Steam burst white between us. Move, she shouted. I moved. We crossed rooftops, signs, and service bridges, while the sunset bled into violet behind the towers. The old market fell beneath us in pieces. Lanterns came on one by one, soft and human, hiding above them the hard blink of cameras. The hunters kept coming. They were patient. That was worse than rage. At the edge of a tall warehouse, Irene slipped. It was small, one boot on loose grit, one hand reaching for nothing. I caught her wrist. For 1 second, we were both still. Her eyes met mine, close enough that I could see fear before she buried it. Don't make this mean anything, she said. I wasn't planning to. But I did not let go until she had her balance. We dropped from the warehouse roof onto a museum annex surrounded by dead garden lights. The building below us was old stone wrapped in modern security panels. The public entrance faced the hill, clean and white, but Irene led me to the back, where ivy grew through cracked concrete and a delivery ramp descended under the structure. The city lights flickered. Once, then again. Far away, every sign in the market dimmed at the same time. The light core pulsed hard inside my bag. My glove burned cold around the message chip. Irene saw my hand tighten. Power surge, she said, but she did not sound convinced. Under the ramp, a steel door waited behind a curtain of hanging cables. Someone had cut through the outer lock recently. On the wall beside it, half hidden under dust, was a brass plate. Dr. Walter Smith Archaeological Systems Restricted Archive. I stood there with the sword in one hand and my father's unfinished voice in the other. Behind us on the rooftops we had crossed, the hunters gathered in silence. Irene placed her palm against the door. Once we go in, she said, you will hear things about Ken you may not want to believe. The door unlocked with a tired metal breath. Cool air rose from the darkness below, carrying the smell of paper, old stone, and burned wires. I looked once at the sunset fading behind the city. Then I followed her down. The stairs under the museum were older than the building above them. I felt that before I understood it. The concrete walls had been poured around stone that did not belong to this century. Old blocks showed through in places, dark and smooth, marked with symbols my eyes almost recognized. The air smelled of dust, wet paper, and electricity left too long inside wires. Irene walked ahead with her pistol low. You have been here before, I said. Once. With Walter? With people who wanted what Walter had. That is becoming a habit. She did not answer. At the bottom of the stairs, the archive opened into a long chamber beneath the museum floor. Shelves climbed into shadow. Glass cases stood under dead lights. Old statues, broken terminals, sealed drawers, maps, bones, circuit boards, temple rubbings, and machine parts filled the room like pieces of several histories that had crashed into one another. In the center of it all, an old man sat beside a work table under a single lamp. He did not look surprised to see me. That made me want to dislike him. Ryu Hayabusa, he said. His voice was thin but steady. You have your father's eyes. I stopped walking. People think grief softens when spoken gently. It does not. Sometimes it only changes shape. You knew him, I said. Yes. Then start with why he died. Walter Smith looked at the sword case, then at the bag on my shoulder. I will start with what he tried to keep alive. He reached for a switch. The lamp above the table flickered and a cracked display rose from the surface. Static crawled over it. Then an image formed. Two statues, one pale, one dark. They were not large in the image, but the room seemed to bend around them. Human shapes, almost. Not gods, not machines, something older than both. The light and shadow seals, Walter said. People called them statues because that was easier than admitting they were locks. Irene stood near the doorway, listening more carefully than someone hearing this for the first time. Walter noticed, but did not stop. Under this city is an ancient system, older than the first corporation, older than the first government that tried to own this coast. It was buried, forgotten, found, renamed, studied, weaponized, and misunderstood. Joshin, I said. The word came from nowhere, or maybe from the message chip warming against my hand. Walter's face tightened. So Ken told you some of it? Ken told me almost nothing. My voice sounded colder than I meant it to. Walter lowered his eyes, and for a moment I saw not a scholar, but an old friend carrying another man's shame. Your father carried more silence than wisdom, he said, but silence and lack of love are not the same thing. I stepped closer. Do not defend him to me. I am not defending him. I am telling you the shape of the wound. The words found me too cleanly. I looked away first. On the table, Walter opened a steel container with trembling hands. Inside was a hollow frame shaped to hold something the size of the light core. The metal around it was engraved with the same marks I had seen in the stairwell stone. I set my bag down and unwrapped the core. Its pale light filled the room. Every dead screen in the archive woke at once. For one breath, the chamber became a storm of images. Temple halls, corporate labs, my father standing younger, blood on his coat but alive, arguing with Walter beside a sealed excavation shaft. A woman's hand closing around a child's blanket. My mother's voice, maybe, or only memory hurting me. Then the images collapsed into static. I had not moved. Irene had. She was beside me now, not touching me, but close enough to catch me if I became someone I did not want to be. Walter watched the light core with wet eyes. Ken took this from the first excavation, he said. The shadow half was already missing. He believed if both halves were joined under the Black Moon cycle, Jashin would open. Open what? Walter looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see the city above us. People. The word was too simple, so it frightened me. Jashin is not just under the city, Walter said. It is threaded through it. Power grids, medical networks, surveillance towers, memory archives, prediction systems. It learns from pain because pain is the easiest human truth to harvest. I thought of my father's message, find the light before the shadow wakes. And Ken? I asked. Walter's mouth tightened. Ken tried to stop the work from inside. He trusted a man named Foster to help bury it again. Irene turned her face away. There it was. A name she knew. I looked at her. Foster. She said nothing. Walter closed the steel container around the light core, but did not lock it. Ken believed Foster wanted containment. Perhaps once he did, but men with clean offices are still men. They begin by protecting the world. Then they protect the system that gives them the power to do it. A sound moved through the ceiling. Not thunder. Footsteps. Many of them. Irene raised her pistol. They're inside the museum. Walter stood too quickly and had to grip the table. Then you cannot stay. You just started explaining, I said. I have spent 12 years explaining to people who arrived too late. He pulled open a drawer and took out a narrow data strip wrapped in temple cloth. Your father left this with me. It will show you the first gate, the real one, not the corporate entrance Foster watches. I took it. The message chip in my glove pulsed once, softer this time, like recognition. Above us, something heavy struck the archive door. Dust fell from the shelves. Irene moved to the stairs, then looked back. Walter. I know. No, she said, you don't. Her voice changed when she spoke his name. Not much. Enough. Walter gave her a tired smile. My dear, I have been old for a very long time. The archive door burst open at the top of the stairs. Masked hunters poured into the narrow passage, black shapes against emergency light. I drew the dragon sword. Walter slammed his palm against a hidden panel beneath the table. Somewhere below us, old machinery woke with a deep, grinding sound. A section of the archive floor opened, revealing iron steps descending into darkness. Service tunnel, Walter said. It connects to the abandoned train line under the museum. Go. You're coming too, I said. That was always the plan. He lifted a worn satchel from beneath the table and stepped toward the opening. Irene fired up the stairwell. Irene had clean shots meant to slow, not kill. I stood between Walter and the door until the first hunter reached the bottom. His crescent mask caught the pale light. You carry the light, he said. I raised the sword. And you talk too much. The old blade moved before my anger could. Steel rang in the underground room. Shelves shook. Old artifacts trembled in their cases. The archive, with all its secrets and all its dead voices, seemed to hold its breath around us. Behind me, Walter started down the iron steps. Irene touched my arm once as she passed. Not a command. Not comfort. A reminder that I was not alone, whether I trusted it or not. I backed toward the opening, sword raised, eyes on the hunters. Then the floor swallowed the light above us, and we descended toward the train tunnels under the city. The service stairs dropped farther than they should have. Each step carried us away from the museum, away from the broken archive, away from the last clean shape of the evening. Above us, the city still had streets, signs, cameras, voices. Down here, there was only heat. Humid air pressed against my face. Pipes sweated along the walls. Old cables hung like roots. The iron stairs trembled under Walter's weight, not because he was heavy, but because the whole passage was tired. Irene went first, pistol raised. Walter followed with one hand on the rail and the other locked around the steel container holding the light core. His satchel bumped against his hip. I stayed behind them with the dragon sword drawn, listening to the hunters descend after us. Their footsteps were calm. That was what bothered me. Angry men rushed. Afraid men stumbled. These men followed like they had already decided how the chase would end. At the bottom, the passage opened into a dead train station buried beneath the museum district. The platform signs were still there, their letters faded beneath grime. West Line. Service closed. Do not enter. Someone had crossed out the warning years ago and written beneath it in black marker, "Everything enters." Walter saw me reading it. This city has a sense of humor, he said. His breathing was worse than before. You need to sit down, I said. I need to be alive 10 more minutes. Sitting is optional. Irene glanced back. Can you move? Walter nodded. It was the kind of nod people give when truth would slow everyone down. We crossed the platform. The old tracks ran into darkness on each side. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, patient beats. Far above us, a train passed on the modern rails, its sound buried and ghost-like, as if another city were moving over our grave. The light core pulsed inside the steel frame. My glove answered. Not loud, not bright, just enough to remind me that my father's message was still with me, still unfinished, still giving orders from wherever death had hidden him. A sound came from the tunnel ahead. Laughter. Small. Quick. Human. I stopped so suddenly Irene nearly turned her pistol on me. What? She whispered. The laughter came again. Not from a child. Not really. But my body remembered it that way. A winter schoolyard. Gray snow along the fence. 3 boys standing around my fallen bag, one of them holding the wooden practice sword my father had left me, their faces red from cold and pleasure. Your father left because he was ashamed of you. I remembered the laugh more than the words. I remembered standing still because crying would have fed them. Ryu, Irene said. I blinked. The tunnel returned. Wet concrete. Dead rails. Walter breathing. Irene watching me with something that was not quite concern and not quite caution. I'm here, I said. The laughter stopped. Then the first hunter stepped from the tunnel ahead. He wore a crescent mask, but his coat was different. Lighter. Built for speed. In one hand he held a short hook blade. In the other, nothing. That empty hand bothered me most. Behind us, more footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Irene looked once at me. Forward? Forward, Walter muttered. I miss lecture halls. The hunter in front bowed his head. Then the lights went out. For one breath, the whole station disappeared. I moved by sound. A blade touched air near my throat. I turned under it and struck with the flat of the dragon sword. Bone did not break. The man still fell hard against the platform edge. Irene fired twice. Her shots flashed white in the dark, showing masks, rails, water. Walter pressed against a pillar with the steel container tight in his arms. Then emergency lights woke along the floor, red and low. The station became a long wound. Hunters came from both sides. I met the first two on the platform. Their weapons were short, meant for close work. Mine needed space, so I made space. One step back, one cut to the rail cable above. Sparks fell between us, and in that light I saw the fast one move behind Walter. Not toward the light core, toward the satchel. Walter! The old man turned too late. The thief assassin slid past him with horrible grace. No wasted motion, no anger. His empty hand opened, closed, and came away with a small, dark object wrapped in gray cloth. Walter cried out and grabbed at him. The thief struck him once in the side, not deep enough to end him, deep enough to fold him. I crossed the platform in 3 strides, but the thief was already moving. He jumped down to the tracks, hit the far wall, and climbed like gravity had forgotten him. His laughter followed him up into a maintenance shaft. That laugh. For a moment, I was 9 years old again. For a moment, I wanted to chase him not for the object, not for Walter, not for the city, but because some part of me still wanted to silence every voice that had ever found my pain amusing. I took 1 step toward the shaft. Irene shouted, "Ryu, don't!" Walter groaned. That stopped me. Not the command, the sound. I turned back. 2 hunters came at Irene from the tunnel mouth. She dropped one with a shot to the shoulder and ducked under the other's blade. I reached them before the second swing. The dragon sword flashed once. His weapon struck the platform in 2 pieces. He backed away. I let him. More masks appeared in the dark beyond him, but none advanced. Their purpose had changed. They had what they came for. The thief's laughter faded upward through the shaft. Then the station shook. The light core burned bright inside its container. Walter clutched his side and tried to stand. What did he take? I asked. Walter's face had gone pale. Not the shadow half, he said before I could ask. A trace fragment, a dead splinter. I kept it hidden because it could find the missing seal if placed near the right system. And now, his breath caught. Irene knelt beside him and pressed her hand against the wound. Walter tried to wave her off. She ignored him. Now, Walter said, someone can use it to guide the shadow home. The words moved through the tunnel like cold water. Who? I asked. Walter looked past me into the dark shaft where the thief had vanished. Jacchio. It was the first time I heard the name clearly. Not as rumor, not as symbol, as a man. The emergency lights flickered lower. Irene helped Walter to his feet, and this time he did not pretend he was fine. His blood marked her sleeve. Not much, but enough. We need a clinic, she said. Walter shook his head. We need the first gate. You need stitches. I need not to die ignorant of my own mistakes. His eyes found mine. Ryu, listen to me. Jacchio does not need every door open at once. He only needs people to believe control is safer than pain. The system will do the rest. If the shadow is guided back before the black moon cycle, the city will begin waking from underneath. The tunnel behind us filled with a distant metallic hum. Not a train. Something older using the shape of one. Walter gripped the light core container tighter. There is a clinic 2 tunnels east, Irene said. Black market. No questions if we pay enough. How do you know that? I asked. She looked at Walter's blood on her hand. Because people like Foster always need places where damage can disappear. There was that name again. Foster. A clean office somewhere above us. A man Ken had trusted. A man Irene knew. a man whose shadow reached even into tunnels where the city pretended it had buried its sins. I put the dragon sword back into its case, but I did not close the latch. Walter leaned against me for 3 steps before he found enough pride to lean on Irene instead. We left the dead station through the east tunnel, following a line of broken blue lights. Behind us, the Crescent Hunters remained in the dark, silent now. They did not need to follow closely. The stolen fragment had already gone ahead of us. And somewhere above the rails, above the towers, above the old grief I had carried across the ocean, the city began to hum as if something beneath it had remembered my name.